and bio. So the opening question, I guess, and obviously feel free to interact with us throughout the session. You can fill in your live questions on the right-hand side of your portal there. And we look forward to trying to get through at least some of those questions before we close the panel. But if not, we've got, enough to chew on, I think, to go with. So let's perhaps go around in the order of billing on the agenda. So the opening question I'd like to ask is, obviously first, please briefly introduce yourself, your organization and your role. And then we would like to hear each panelist's perspective on what the most important things are in bringing together large volume manufacturing of advanced batteries for energy storage. This could be based on your own experience with Northvolt or another project, or in a more general sense, what you feel the sector needs most. And let's start with Joakim Palmgren from the European Investment Bank, if we could please, Joakim. Oh, I think it's the classic Zoom. Can we unmute Joakim, please? Hi there, Joakim.
There you go. Sorry for that.
No problem.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, thank you for letting me start. My name is Joakim Palmgren. I work with the European Investment Bank. Just briefly on that, I mean, as you all may know, it's a bank owned by the member states of the Union, and it's our role to support European industry and the build out of new sectors like this. I've been with the EIB for 15 years now in various roles, doing corporate lending, but now lately mostly focused on what we call non-recourse project finance. So that's a little bit where I get involved in the Northvolt case, since it's not your average corporate, but as Andy mentioned, a startup. It's been quite a long journey. I think we first were in contact with them in 2017. And we were also involved in financing their demo plant. You may be aware that the gigafactory in the north of Sweden is based on a smaller scale demo plant that's now operational and is used to prove the technology and the research and facility for the large scale manufacturing that is to come in Skellefteå up north. So we've been with Northvolt for quite some time, and that's a little bit my background and involvement in the Northvolt story. I think it's if we're discussing financing of a project, I think it's important that we talk. Well, most of these panelists here have been involved in the Skellefteå financing, which is one project, whereas obviously the Northvolt story is much more than that. A lot of preparation, and they now built an organization of more than 500 people. So if you want to focus the discussion on what it takes to finance a project, I mean, it's obviously, well, the Skellefteå project, Northvolt is very specific, and hopefully we will see more of that. But yes, to clarify that part, when we talk about what is required, in this case, yeah, I'm sure we get into that, but it's structured finance, and that's also what all the panelists here are very much, I think most of us are focused on.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Joakim. I guess the very simple answer is, what does it take to finance a gigafactory? I guess lots of money, I suppose, would be a very simple answer. But you know, we've got a bit more than an hour, so let's go into depth. But yeah, thank you for going first. It's always a tricky one on the first day of a session, and yeah, thank you very much. So moving on to Bo Normark, who's something of a well-known figure, perhaps for a lot of you within the energy industry. Hi there, Bo, and thank you so
Hi
much
there.
for joining us. Hi. So yeah, obviously, for those that still need some introduction for you, please briefly introduce yourself, organisation and role, and then I guess your quick take perspective on the most important things in bringing together large volume manufacturing of advanced batteries. Let's just say for the energy transition, I suppose that gives it a more general feel. And of course, either based on your own experience with Northvolt or in a more general sense, what you feel the sector needs most.
Well, thank you for having me here. I can get today. I'm working for Energy, which is, I mean, European company that we have a role to actually develop new industries in the renewable sector. But my contact with Northvolt actually started in January 2016, when I was called to a meeting in Stockholm to meet Peter Carlson. He had just left Tesla and started a company called Swedish Gigafactory, SGF Energy. And he told me, I'm going to build Europe's biggest battery factory in Sweden. And I said, Peter, have you been out too much in the sun in California? What's wrong with you? But very, very quickly, I can tell he convinced me. And I remember quite well, he said, look, Bo, he said, I don't think you understand. Europe will need 15 to 25 of these factories. So all I'm saying, I'm going to build one of them, and maybe a few of them. So on that journey, I became a member of the advisory board of SGF Energy and followed in 2016 when we had the feasibilities were made for the project that later would become the Northvolt story. And in my role, gradually then and it has to do with finance, because initially money from Northvolt actually came mainly from small amounts from private financiers, but then money from Energy actually, and from the Swedish Energy Agency. They financed the first, I would say, 10, 12 million euros there. And then when Energy invested in Northvolt, I started representing Northvolt in Energy in Northvolt. But also more important, in 2017, I was asked then, Energy were asked by the European Commission to give some background to what later became the European Battery Alliance, as was mentioned here. So I was leading then the Battery Alliance work for Energy, assembling the industrial around this. And of course, Northvolt from very early on was, so to say, the key example of this. And I could spend a lot, but to make a short story, I mean, what does it take? I mean, I can tell you what it takes from the beginning. Because when we started initiated the European Battery Alliance in 2017, there were 4 thoughts of school, actually. There were a lot of people, and most of them said it's too late because Asia has won the race already, we can forget it. There were also people that said it's too early because we need to wait for the next technology. And there were also people that said that, or the automotive industry in Europe, largely at that stage said, well, we don't need battery manufacturing in Europe. We can import. And last but not least, I think there was a lack of awareness that we need to import skills also if we want to make it. So I would say that the first thing you need is you have to believe in the idea. And that, I think, Northvolt was very instrumental because they had some credibility. It was founded by 2 Tesla guys. And when 2 Tesla guys coming from US and telling us that we can do it in Europe, of course, it had a lot of impact. But the main thing for the first was to create credibility. But I will stop there. To create credibility was the key. And also believe in that the mission could be accomplished, actually. That Europe could compete.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for me, I remember hearing some of the arguments about that we could continue to import, or that China had perhaps already gone far ahead. But I think, yeah, I mean, at the beginning, Joakim said that the Northvolt story has been going for quite a while, but it's from 2017 till now, and then the factory's already under construction. That's a lot quicker than many comparable industries, certainly in the energy sector. So yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. Okay, so next up we've got Stephen Cespedes from BNP Paribas, who is a director, sorry, not a doctor. How do you be a doctor of project finance? So he's director of project finance. Stephen, please, if you would, and your brief introduction, quick run through of your role and how you kind of see the important things in terms of bringing together large volume manufacturing of advanced batteries.
Hi everyone. So as you said, I'm working for BNP Paribas and joined 13 years ago as part of the structured financings for energy and commodities in the first place. So oil and gas, but also a bit of mining and infrastructure in Africa. And more recently, I joined the project finance team to focus on power, renewables, and energy transition kind of topics. So back in August 2017, we were actually mandated to act as a sole debt advisor for Northvolt. And at the time, there were only 15, basically, among the company, with very high-profile managers, the founders, but also the CFO was already there, the chairman, and a few, let's say, masters of the battery coming from Japan, bringing the highest possible expertise. What it takes to bring a gigafactory in Europe, I think from the Northvolt experience, what we can say is first perseverance and proactiveness to overcome the many challenges that you can face. What struck me when we first met them is that there was a very clear industrial plan from the very beginning. They knew what they wanted to produce, they knew how already, and they had already a very fairly stringent timeline to obey. It was a race, so they had to move fast, and that's why proactiveness is always necessary. They already brought on board the highest possible technical expertise. Ano-san is a reputable Japanese expert in the battery manufacturing sector with Sony, Toda, BASF, etc. It also takes, as our colleagues said, political support. And European institutions to stand up and take responsibilities and support those kind of initiatives, which are, although bullish and a bit frightening somehow, but you have to follow their lead as long as they prove credible and they have a plan. And from the other financiers' side, I would say it also takes willingness from the lenders to get out of the comfort zone, take new risks, or at least work on new risks, analyze them, and take mitigation measures that are appropriate. And also to be, talking about experience, to be able to overcome past traumatism. Because what was a big barrier as well for moving cell manufacturing in Europe was also the trauma from the PV panels and the prices crunching in a few years. So I think we were asked maybe 50 times why it wouldn't be the same for cell manufacturing. I think it's still a very good question and valid question, and there are arguments to be brought, but yeah, you can feel that banks are sometimes coming out from a trauma, so you need to bring a lot of comfort. Yeah.
Right, understood. Okay, thank you, Stephen. Moving around the group, Edward Reed, who is a Director of Advisory Services at the consultancy WSP. Thanks for joining us, Edward. And I don't suppose I need to recap the question again. You okay with that?
Yeah, no, I've got the question, Andy. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. As Andy correctly said there, my name's Edward Reed. I'm a Director of WSP. WSP's got nearly 50,000 employees across the globe, and we've got sort of significant capability in both the manufacturing and the energy sector. So getting involved with Northvolt was a hugely exciting opportunity, and my colleagues in Sweden were even involved in some of the very early stages of sort of some of the site selection processes with our local teams in Sweden. Getting straight down to Andy's point in terms of what makes what do you need to do to deliver a project such as Northvolt? And I think picking up on some of Bo's and Stephen's initial comments there, for me, I think it's largely around creativity. We saw so many times that Plan A just was not going to work, and whether it be arrangements with a potential supplier, a potential contractor, with all these things, there's always challenges, but Northvolt were always very, very agile and able to change the plan. They always had a sort of, they were very quick to identify when things were not going according to plan, and to come up with a plan B. And I think that's very courageous. It takes quite a lot of management time. It was absolutely necessary to respond to some of what Stephen was talking around there. Around educating some of the lenders around new risks. Some of the initial ideas from Northvolt may well have been slightly challenging to deliver and execute, but with the strength of the advisory team that they put together, we developed an appropriate solution that was deliverable and got us to where we got to. But I think if sticking to Plan A and really sticking to Plan A and not moving from that, I think would inevitably have meant it take longer to get to the finishing line. And as again Stephen mentioned, it was felt to be a bit of a race. Timetable was important, so flexibility and in that approach, I think is pretty key, really. And I think we still see that in the project today. I was personally on site in Sweden with colleagues from Northvolt last week. A lot of very sort of agile thinking exists in the organisation in terms of how they're executing and delivering that project, and that's good. That's great to see.
Excellent. Yes, I mean it feels a little bit from what both you and Stephen have said. There's a lot about skills and the right people being involved, and so on. Along with a lot of other things that have come together for Northvolt, such as having a good site that can be pretty much all renewable powered, and so on. And I guess at the moment the skills in the renewable sector is something that's a little bit of a gap at the moment, I guess. And it'd be interesting to see how many more sort of these visionary people we need to kind of step forward. Like I guess you're referring to Peter Carlson and his team at Northvolt there, I guess. Okay, lots of other things to delve into, but let's get around the panel. There's a couple more to go now. So Tim van Pelt, who is with ING Bank. You're director with renewables and power for the energy sector. If you could just, reel off your brief introduction and your response to the opening question, that'd be terrific.
Sure, thanks for the opportunity, Andy. So I'm Tim van Pelt, the director in the renewables and power team, which sits within the broader energy team at ING Bank.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Your sound is a little bit distant.
Is this better?
That's much better, yeah.
Okay, apologies. Okay.
No problem.
So I'm not sure what you got, but I'll do it again. So I'm Tim van Pelt, a director in the renewables and power team that sits within the broader energy team at ING Bank, a Dutch bank that some of you may know as a leading bank in the energy space, supporting clients in the energy transition in the wider sense. I think it's fair to say that our focus historically has been, or the bread and butter has been on project finance structures, of which Northvolt is one example of a special kind, I would say. But definitely also working towards more hybrid structures, and also in that sense, Northvolt is a key example. We were involved as a documentation bank, so representing the senior debt side of things, including EIB and some of the other banks. Maybe to your question, and I think a lot has been covered already by the earlier speakers, but indeed, it's a unique cocktail, I would say, with various ingredients. But I think I think it all starts with the vision, and it comes from the leadership, and in that sense, having people like Peter Carlson involved and strongly formulating a vision for the niche that's there for gigafactory production in Europe was an essential starting point. But then to take it forward, it has required the commitment of various players, among which advisors, equity providers, and all the others to make this happen. It's definitely been a marathon, even if it has been quite swift from some perspective, perhaps. But it's definitely been possible only because of the ongoing commitments and also the willingness of everyone to think and structure very creatively. And then perhaps finally, the thing that to drive it home, I would say, is courage for everyone involved to take a leap, and through cooperation and a bit of mutual honesty from time to time about realism or unrealism of certain expectations. That's been all required to get this done.
Sure, thank you very much, Tim. So I guess when I glibly said at the beginning that what it takes to build a gigafactory is lots of money, I mean, obviously that's just one side of it, but also within that, I think what you're saying is that it takes a real blend of different types of financing, and as you say, a lot of creativity to structure the way that's financed, I guess. Okay, and yeah, our last but not least, our panelist, Marco Schwer, who is the Director and Sector Lead for Renewable Energy with SMBC, Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation. Marco, can you hear us? It's the classic 2020 problem. I think you're on mute. Do you know Morse code, maybe? Sorry, Lucy, can we get Marco unmuted?
Hi, Marco is unmuted, just trying to sort out his sound if possible.
Okay. All right, in the meantime, if our viewers would like to come up with all their questions, I know it's a little bit trickier towards the beginning of a session where you haven't heard everybody's full point of view, but by all means. Marco, can you hear us now? We still can't hear you.
Hi, Marco. I recommend you log back out and log back in again, if at all possible, and then we should be able to hear you.
Okay. Still can't hear. If you could attempt to, I guess, either refresh or...
Sounds now, you can hear me.
We can hear you, yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Hello, thank you for joining us.
Right, the wonders of technology. So
Yep.
Thanks for your patience.
No problem.
Marco Schwer, I've been with SMBC now for 13 and a half years, and always been in project finance and structured finance, initially starting on the infrastructure side. Typical projects were sort of PPPs or PFIs in the social infrastructure sector, then moved on to lead our smart meter investments, particularly in the UK. And then in 2018, I joined the renewables team to focus on investments in the renewables sector. Prior to SMBC, I was on the equity side at Bilfinger, essentially doing the same, just from a different perspective or a different seat at the table. Before I think I start commenting on your question, just a brief but important message that the comments I'm making here today are, my personal views and opinions and do not necessarily reflect those of my employer. In terms of the question then, what it needs to finance a gigafactory or a large manufacturing site for battery storage overall, there's not much more to add to what my colleagues here on the panel have already said, other than I think it requires a combination of a number of ingredients. If you think about it as a cooking recipe, where you need a good and solid view from a political regulatory aspect and also macroeconomic view. Where do we want to go? Do we need more batteries in future? And I think there's going to be a resounding yes, because clearly there is a strong transition from combustion engine vehicles towards electric vehicles. And then the next ingredient would be, so who's going to implement that? And of course, there are a number of corporations out there, mainly in the Asia Pacific region that do produce batteries. They can do it, but they can't do it all. And Europe has been lacking capacity and is still behind the curve on that aspect. So how can we then make it happen, as it were? And clearly, in Northvolt, the example was given. There have been some very, very capable and skilled leaders with a strong vision and a very strong business case, which I think got all of us here on the panel hooked. But it still required a lot of work, and because you have to take that vision, which we all know can sometimes be a great idea, but not necessarily something that is investable or bankable. And you have to translate that into a structure that in the end has attracted an enormous amount of financings, because the investors and banks alike felt comfortable. And so you had to go through the entire risk profile of the transaction as you would do on any deal. What's the position on the construction risk? What's the position on the offtake risk, material supply side of things, and many more aspects. And I think by going into that deep down analysis, you come up with some clear must-haves, and then it comes down to the developer or the sponsor in this case to come up with a solution that also works for them. So agility and creativity, as Ed mentioned earlier, very, very much needed in order to get through the tunnel and come out at the other end of it. And I think the last point I would like to mention is you need strong and capable parties involved who have vested interests. This is a journey, and I don't think there have been many gigafactories financed on a project finance basis and a non-recourse basis. So whilst everybody can see the rationale and the business case, as a lender, as an equity investor, you really want the parties to play together and to commit together for a long period of time. And I think that is a good combination that somebody like Northvolt has found, where they've got quite a diverse group of stakeholders in the project who have all got pretty long commitments.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks, Marco. So I guess we'll get on a little bit further down the line to kind of, one thing about this is that it is a magnificent project, and it will produce, dozens of gigawatt hours of batteries. But clearly, the need appears to be that we're going to need a lot more of these. So We'll perhaps get onto that sort of specific blend a bit further down the list of questions. But yeah, one thing that I wanted to ask, and perhaps is a little bit of a journalist stock question, I suppose, in terms of what the challenges always are. But I think Edward, for example, referred to you need a flexibility to have more than just a plan A. And now, so Northvolt does bring together a lot of key players from the automotive industry. And as you mentioned, Marco, the off-takers are, you know, pretty vital to have some sense of who those are going to be. So it brings a lot of key players from the automotive industry to both private and public financial institutions. So yeah, what has been particularly challenging in getting this project to the stage that it is now, where we already have one facility under construction and another, which I believe will be built in Germany, slightly smaller, is on the way soon. Yeah, who'd like to, who's going to be brave and take that one on first?
Well, I can comment first on this agility to give an example, because in the early days in 2016, I mean, the idea was to build a factory that was, I mean, resembled the Nevada factory, Tesla, building cylindrical cells. Because from a pure, I mean, if you have been trained in that environment, these guys were convinced that was the most efficient cell design, and that was the focus. And I was participating in many meetings. But however, since they very early on started working together with the potential off-takers, that's how they, I mean, got very clear signals that if you want to sell to us in Europe, you have to make prismatic cells. So and I think it was quite bullish also that they didn't have any pride in that. I mean, they accept. I mean, if the off-takers want prismatic cells, it's prismatic cells, and that's one example. And so I think it's very important to this interaction between the off-takers, and also I would say integration both upstream and downstream in the value chain, because that was one of the key, I would say, elements to be competitive in Europe, to be able to establish sound, I may say, supply chains, upstreams, and also have the customers on board downstream. That was essential, and it happened very early. I mean, unusually early for a company of this type. They had actually the off-takers on board.
Right, so I guess the other side of that question is not just what are the challenges, but what went unusually smoothly, I suppose. Anyone else want to weigh in on that first one? Stephen, did you have your hand up there briefly? Oh, you have to take yourselves off mute every time you speak.
Okay.
Apologies for that. Sorry about that. Yeah. Thanks.
So indeed, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since we were involved at a very early stage, so because we were already involved in the financing of the demonstration facility, we could witness that there were many challenges. All the topics needed to be covered already at that time, at least to some extent, even though a larger share of risk was probably allocated. But I would say that the main challenges first was the startup profile of the company. I mean, we were not dealing with like EDF or Total, with a utilities profile and a very large corporate balance sheet standing behind it. So that was the first challenge, clearly, and we just had to deal with a clear expert management team, but it's sometimes not enough. And also everything needed to be put in place, as Mr. Normark just mentioned. There was no off-take arrangements in the first place, and even the choice of the products to be sold was to be made. So even though they started with cylindrical, they adapted and changed the plan to move to prismatic fairly early in 2018. But off-take is not everything, and there are multiple risks, as Marco mentioned, to be covered, such as the construction and to some extent, so upstream or upstreaming and downstream of so going up to the supply chain. It's a great opportunity. It's a potentially differentiating factor, but it's also an enhance or higher risk to be taken, because it's a full set of expertise and capabilities to be developed, which is totally different from the downstream aspect. So it's almost doubling the work for the company. So you have to overcome all of these.
Okay, sorry, Bo.
No, I might add a risk, because you asked about risk and challenge. One challenge was to be able to get a place in the queue with the machine builders in Asia. That was a major challenge, because they were heavily overloaded, and for a small company then to take a queue place to get machines to the first lab factory was a big challenge at that time.
Sure. And sorry, so the decision on making the prismatic cells versus cylindrical. Now, I think a lot of people will understand that cylindrical are the types such as 18650 that you might find in the Teslas. But then I think a lot of the European automakers have gone more for prismatic. And sorry to suddenly throw this slightly technical question in, but could you just briefly explain for the audience what that kind of meant in terms of the company's plans themselves, and sort of, further why you think there might have been more potential seen in that? Or, obviously, if you'd rather not go too much into that, then it's not. But
you're asking me, or?
I guess you brought it up first, so yeah.
No, but I can tell you, it's actually so that all European manufacturers have got for prismatic, all of them, and so it's not. And the idea was that they should. They had also initially a plan that they should have a smaller volume of prismatic cells. So it wasn't that it wasn't on the map, but the major would be cylindrical. But it requires also, of course, that they need to contact different machine builders, because given the Tesla history, they had most of the contacts they had with the line of machine builders that are specialized in cylindrical cells. But some of them, especially the big Chinese one, they can make both. So, but I think it was more, I would say, a matter of accepting that's where things are going. And by the way, another thing about in the cell design that was critical, this decision in the big, it was a lot of people at that time believed that there would be a standardization in prismatic cells as it is in cylindrical. But that has not happened, actually. That's a quite interesting fact. There is no standardization, I would say, today with prismatic cells as it is with cylindricals. So it's a big change, in fact, because the production line must be much more flexible.
Sure, and thank you, Bo. And from our stationary storage point of view, we're starting to see companies like China's CATL making bespoke, large format prismatic cells for stationary grid storage, which, is something that was almost completely unthought of a few short years ago. Tim, did you want to have your hand up there? It's nice that people are physically hands up.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I prefer it. Yeah.
Okay, just checking that you can hear me. Yeah. Okay. But maybe let's go on to what Bo was mentioning. So this is just one example of how in the entire process, even before the senior players came into the picture, there was a lot of, or there have been a lot of moving parts, which obviously requires a lot of flexibility from the technical side, but that has a downstream knock-on effect on requiring a similar level of flexibility and thinking on the financing side. So arguably, I think one of the challenges from a purely financial, from a financing perspective, has been for a large group of senior debt providers whose frame of reference is a very fixed sort of template almost type of financings in the renewables and power space, to bring that same group and get it on board and allow or foster a lot more flexibility in thinking and getting or wrapping their heads around the new risks and both financial, technical, and others that this type of new technology brings along with it. And that's been, I think, a constant in the entire process up until the very end, and arguably still now that it's been financed. So I think that's also getting back to your earlier question, what has gone surprisingly smooth. I would say for the group of institutions that ultimately financed, I think it's fair to say that a lot of them took a view on many various aspects of this financing and got comfortable with it, which wasn't a given, I would say, at the outset. So I think that's, well, maybe Northvolt and Stephen may disagree, but I think that went quite smoothly in the greater scheme of things.
Yeah, clearly there's a risk with kind of taking on something essentially quite new with this, but a lot of these venerable institutions, I guess, wouldn't be involved if the rewards weren't also, essentially spelled out. Okay, so any more quick thoughts on this initial challenges question? Yeah, Edward, yes, please, yeah.
Yeah, so just getting back to your question, Andy. So, and I think Bo and Tim have sort of picked up some points there around some of the supply chain and the equipment providers. I think the real big challenge in terms of getting banks comfortable was, the sheer number of parties involved in this project, and the number of equipment providers, both big and small, number of different construction companies, again, big and small. The list of parties involved is absolutely phenomenal. And I think for such a young company to manage that and to have done a remarkably good job so far, I think is a massive achievement. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they've got contracts in place which are all very good and all very suitable. But at the end of the day, a lot of the coordination, the interface risk in terms of delivering a project like this really does sit with the developer, and the developer's ability to move. I remember the first conversation I had with Northvolt, which again was probably a bit like Stephen's, really back in 2017, probably early 2018. There were 15, 20 people in the office. When I was there last week, someone told me that the head count now is around about 700 people. But that's a massive growth trajectory that's needed to deliver these sorts of projects. So I think that is the big challenge, is the sheer complexity of this. This is not a project that could have been delivered by a sort of fairly shell project company sort of setup. This has had to be set up like a proper business, and that's what Northvolt have done, and they've got some real strong management capability at all levels, and somehow they've created what has been a very attractive proposition for candidates to come and join them. And I think when I speak to a lot of them, they see a long-term sort of career with the business, and that which tells you it's got to be more than just developing a gigafactory. If you're developing a gigafactory, that's a 4 or 5 year time horizon. I think to get the best people in the market, you probably need a longer term view as well, which I think is something that Northvolt probably has.
Excellent. No, it is by all accounts a pretty remarkable project. Let's move on to the next question, I guess, if we can. And I think, as we do keep saying that it's quite remarkable, and that there will be several other gigafactories in Europe, some at, obviously much earlier stage of development than others. Northvolt appears to be racing ahead. And it's, as we've already gone over, it's pretty remarkable, again, keep using that word, in that it's a European startup and will certainly be among the largest players in Europe, if not the world, by mid-2020s. But I guess, as we kind of alluded to before, we probably, or almost certainly, need lots more of these types of factories. But do we see Northvolt as being kind of a one-off? And I guess that could be in terms of the financing model as well, in the complexity and so on. Or will there be things that are likely to be replicable or similar in the way other gigafactories are developed and built? I know that's a bit of an abstract question because we're kind of looking to outside of this immediate scope of this project. But yes, would anyone be bold enough to offer a view on that? But Joakim, can I put you on the spot there from an EIB perspective? As the mute. Yeah.
That's down mute, sure. No, that's my personal view. I mean, hopefully we've learned a lot from Northvolt and can apply similar financing models. But in my view, there will be a mix. I mean, we see large Asian players establishing production capacity in Europe for the European market. We also see other initiatives that are similar to Northvolt, but not as advanced. So, I mean, I think what we're looking for, I mean, Tesla have their partner, Northvolt has teamed up with the automotives they have teamed up with. And yeah, my view is that we will see various constellations. I mean, we need strong consortiums behind this, considering the complexity, as we've heard here. But again, hopefully we'll learn something from the Northvolt financing, and we'll see that as well in one form or another going forward.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. Anyone else ready to jump in on this one?
I could comment there also because I think it's a direct replica. I think is unlikely. I mean, for reason being that I think it's very difficult to in a short time bring together a crew of the skill that Northvolt did. I mean, remember they brought about like 60 people from Korea and Japan in about 6 months' time, and that will not happen again. So I think it's a matter of skills. However, the situation is also difficult, as someone else said here. I mean, today it's more likely that you will also see gigafactories where there's a combination maybe of a startup that can join forces with, for instance, an Asian player, because they are here now. And that's a big change. I mean, we had, remember now that CATL are the biggest factory in the world. They are building in Germany, not in Asia. LG Chem are building the biggest factory they also have in the world in Poland, not in Asia. So the Asians are here, and so there are many more opportunities today how you set up a company, a battery company. I would say more opportunities, and also the willingness from of the OEMs to engage is higher. So all this will give more opportunities. However, also as someone Joakim hinted, there are fewer and fewer dancing partners also around on the offtake side.
Right, okay. So would anyone from either the financing side or from the, I guess, Edward, from the consulting side, sort of ready to take this one on, whether Northvolt is kind of a one-off and a unique financing model, or, you know, kind of what, I guess, the immediately replicable lessons are, and how factories, not necessarily of similar scale, but of this type, might get going, I guess.
Yeah, I'm happy to contribute to that. I think Northvolt is unique. There's no doubt about that. Certainly for the time being, given the history of the business itself, it's a startup essentially, and the way they've pulled the strings together to make it happen. Will there be similar structures in future? There could be, although I'm not 100% sure, because as and others have alluded to, the structures are very complex, because we need to look at many aspects, and not least the offtake aspect. And at this stage, at this point in time, when you look at the car industry, battery cells are quite bespoke. A Volkswagen requires a different specification to a BMW or Renault or Peugeot. So therefore, you have to have different production capacities and factories that are able to produce exactly the type of battery cell that is needed. And so we are not talking about off-the-shelf products as you may get to in stationary storage.
Mm-hmm.
It's an entirely different proposition.
Yeah.
So the question really is where the car industry is going. Are we going to see bespoke solutions going forward as we see today? Certainly for, I suppose, more premium brands of cars. Or are we getting to a stage perhaps where there's going to be a more uniform approach to battery cells that can be then widely used across the industry, which would allow an entirely different financing model, perhaps something that could be replicated on multiple occasions.
Right, okay. So it's as much about whether that technology types will be replicable and scalable, or whether they'll kind of remain bespoke as it is for the financing, I guess. Okay, anyone else would like to weigh in on this one? Northvolt as a one-off? Okay.
Yeah. I would just like to add something, just to say first they have an ambitious growth plan. So Northvolt themselves might have to use the same structure or tools. And I think that the structure we've put in place, or a similar structure, or at least a non-recourse financing, can be of interest for whatever consortium is built in the future, because agreeing and putting or joining balance sheets together is never an easy point, and sharing risks with financiers or finding other sources of funds is always attractive. So let's see how it goes, but yes, there might be some appetite there as well.
Okay, so insofar as the way a kind of a consortium of financiers has been put together for a project like this, that's something that there may well be scope for in other projects, I guess. Yes,
especially in the context of where sponsors are from various industries, different cultures. I think they would like to see potentially debt financiers alongside them as well. Absolutely. Those investments are huge capital requirements. So certainly. So yeah, not just a continental effort, but a global effort, really, I guess, in a lot of ways. Okay, let's move on to the next question then, I guess. And I think this is one that's perhaps might be a little bit left field to some of you in terms of the Northvolt story, but obviously Energy-Storage.news, my website, is very much focused on the stationary storage sector, beginning with, but not limited to, its combination with renewables and in particular solar, I guess, but again, not limited to that. But, you know, as we know, the demand for electric vehicle batteries is likely to far outstrip demand from the stationary storage sector, at least for some time. We're just wondering what some of the synergies are, and I guess oppositely, conversely, the differences, and how can energy storage at the different scales, grid, household and commercial batteries, kind of capture the imagination of investors and the finance community in the way electric transport has. I mean, can it, and does it need to, I guess, would be the other offshoot questions to that. Anyone willing to offer up a view on that one? Please.
I can always comment. Sorry,
Okay.
wait, yeah, it can take a second. Someone go first, yeah.
Okay, well, I doubt I can add much to what Bo has to say, but hopefully it's consistent with what he's thinking. But I guess obviously...
Tim, the sound's gone a little bit.
Is that better?
A little bit better, yeah.
Okay. So obviously I'm not sure if I can add to what Bo will be saying, and hopefully it's consistent with what he's about to say, but I think it will be difficult to compete with the hockey stick curve, more or less, that the electrical vehicle industry is showing in terms of demand, and that's definitely in terms of attracting investors and by extension the wider finance community, that's where energy storage arguably has a bit of a drawback compared to the EV industry. Having said that, I do think that the energy storage community will benefit from all the investments that are going into the energy storage production space because of the EV growth. So even if it isn't directly because of the demands that the energy storage business case is showing, the energy storage off-takers will benefit from it, driving down costs and everything else. I hope that was all understandable, because I understood that my mics are on and off. Apologies for that.
I think just about, yeah. I mean, I think the general gist that I got certainly was that the synergies in terms of cost reduction, I guess in particular, from EVs to stationary storage will be a big one. And yeah, obviously the energy storage community will benefit, as you say, from the massive scale up of EV batteries. Okay, Bo, your view on that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would say that we have been, for the automotive industry, I think it's easier to find the tipping points. I mean, when things will tip over, like we see now when leasing an electric car is cheaper than leasing a fossil car. That's for me a typical tipping point. We don't see, it's more difficult to find that the stationary storage, but one I see coming is when PVs plus batteries become competitive. And I think we are very close. We are very, very close. And that for me will be a tipping point in demand. The second, I would say on the grid, on the power system side, I mean, just the fact now that we are pushing up the target, the EU target for reduction to 55% from 40 in 2030, is likely to lead to a significant rise in the CO2 price, which means that we will much faster than anticipated, we will actually shut down fossil units, coal units for pure, and that will trigger battery use, I would say, sooner. So although the stationary market is smaller, I think that is currently underestimated if we take into account these two things, that we will see tipping points in economy for PV plus batteries. And we will also see a significant increase in demand for flexibility when you are closing, I mean, coal much faster than anticipated.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, we've just seen in the last few days, Hawaiian Electric, the main utility for the island state of Hawaii in America, obviously, has released the prices awarded for solar and storage power plants coming. And now I think obviously Hawaii is a set of islands, or archipelago of islands, is, you know, the circumstances again are pretty different to a mainland continental territory. But some of those prices were very competitive versus, you know, what they're paying to import fossil fuels already. And I think generation from something like 8 US cents per kilowatt hour, you know, it's a pretty exciting stuff. And kind of that's, hopefully we would see that kind of scale, you know, arriving in the rest of the world sooner rather than later. And as you say, as the more stringent net zero impacts come in, then, you know, obviously the quicker we need to act on that. Anyone else?
Maybe a final comment, but sorry. Sorry to interrupt, but maybe to complement, or even if that is the case, compared to EVs, power storage, or integrated into with power production, has the drawback or the challenge that there are other competitive technologies available compared to EVs, where, well, ultimately it will need to electrify to meet the carbon targets that the EU is setting. So in that sense, the business case is less straightforward, or the outlook is less clear on how lithium-ion will compare to flow batteries, compare to hydrogen and other alternatives available. So I think that's another point to consider there.
Absolutely. Okay. No, thank you. Thank you for jumping in with that, Tim. And yeah, we can hear you loud and clear now as well, which is nice. Okay, excellent. So anyone else on a quick one between those synergies? And then after that, we've got a question coming from the audience.
Sure. Just comment from me on that there are undoubtedly synergies because of the technological advancement. So those batteries used in EVs are of very high technological standard, and of course there's an expectation that those standards can be replicated in some way, shape, or form in the stationary storage. I guess the challenge for the stationary storage market is exactly as Tim said. It's about the business model. What is the battery supposed to be doing, and how is it going to generate revenues? And then to look at it from a project finance perspective, how is it going to generate revenues that are stable and predictable over a long period of time, so that investors and lenders alike would eventually get their money back and their returns. And I think that is currently the question that everybody is asking themselves, compared with the view that there are alternative technologies that Tim mentioned, and how do we get around this? Co-location seems to be a way forward, where the intermittent generation from a wind or solar farm can be complemented by some form of battery storage to help with peak shifting and shaving and such like time shifting. But in my view, there have been relatively few projects out there where co-locations actually does apply on day one. We see a few being considered now in retrospect, where batteries are connected to, for example, a solar farm. And I think the question really here is, at what stage does the investment into a stationary battery pay off? Because the capacity is increasing, and the prices per capacity is going down. So how soon we get to the tipping point, I think that's better for the consultants and experts to comment on.
Terrific. Okay, thank you for that, Marco. So I've got a question coming from the audience, and I think it's maybe a little bit away from our immediate discussion, but I think since we've got a question from the audience, I think it's only the done thing to give it a go and see if anyone can answer it. So Hussam Abu Othman, thank you for your question. It says, as you may know, I assume that the battery needs a replacement at the end of its lifetime, compared to the lifetime of a PV panel. What kind of financing is available in such a case? So I guess that's to do with the expected lifetime of batteries, and how, not just from the manufacturing perspective, but I guess kind of from the off-taker's perspective, what sort of assurances they can get on that, if that's a reasonable enough way to put your question, Hussam. Anyone willing to take a punt on this? Kind of the long-term value, I guess, let's say, of batteries.
Willing to take an initial stab at it, but I think that's also one of the key differentiators of Northvolt, at least one where they've been very explicit from the outset that the end of life of batteries is as important to them as the start of life. And I think increasingly, especially for European producers, the value of these end-of-life batteries will only increase as those batteries contain scarce materials that are much cheaper and more efficient to harvest And which is only one of the reasons why Northvolt is looking into that together with Norsk Hydro in their Revolt initiative. So in that sense, the business case for harvesting used batteries, I suppose, will be there, if not from not only from a financial perspective, then for sure from a sustainability or security of supply perspective.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. And I believe we do have a session on that tomorrow at the Storage Summit around end of life, repurposing, and second life, and that's called A New Lease of Life for Lithium. That panel. Okay, but just to briefly kind of deviate from what we had immediately to hand. So you mentioned in terms of the sustainability, and I think Northvolt has. Said that they will be among, if not the greenest, then certainly among the greenest batteries in the world. But my understanding was that, regardless of that, the batteries and systems they produce need to be kind of cost effective. And yeah, I suppose, what are the dynamics of financing and the production of more sustainable, greener, but essentially cost effective energy technologies? And I guess, one adjunct to that is, will it still require a good amount of policy support for that to happen? Anyone willing to take a view on that? Basically, general terms, the sustainability of the Northvolt batteries in general, and whether that's important to the business case or not going forwards, I guess.
Well, I can comment. I mean, it's clear that the geographical location is partly decided on the availability of clean and very low cost electricity. And I think also, if you go forward here, what we see now with the falling costs of renewable, especially new renewable, so it's likely that I mean, everyone seems to believe that eventually solar will be the cheapest electricity you can get. So I think hopes are quite good. And in terms of how long, so many governments now put support schemes in place for supporting renewable energy, and the Nordic countries, they have such a place in their own scheme in place with green certificates. But that scheme will actually be abolished 2022 instead of 2030 because it's not needed anymore. And I think you will see a positive development in other parts of Europe as well. Support scheme will be needed, but not for so long.
I mean, I guess perhaps that's a little bit of the role that the consumer has to play, I suppose, in kind of demanding the more sustainable aspects of things, and in terms of allowing businesses to, it can't just necessarily expect things to take their natural course unless people begin to demand it to some extent, I guess. Okay, we've just got a very short time for maybe one or two more quick questions. I guess the thing we need to really get to, or perhaps we don't, it's been nice not to mention it, but clearly there's a global pandemic happening at the moment. We're just wondering if you could give us a view, and as Marco pointed out, these might be more personal views and certainly views of your employers, but yeah, in what way does the COVID-19 situation change the outlook on how you and others in the finance and business communities view projects such as battery gigafactories? And is a green economic recovery, which a lot of people are talking about in the press certainly, is that likely, or will the overall economic slowdown, which we've unfortunately seen, lead to a lot more caution among investors, I guess? Yeah, was that your hand up, Edward, or?
Yeah, look, I think we've seen in the Northvolt situation some quite significant support for the project, both from everything from the local municipality through to support from the energy providers, through to support from really sort of government and the court process when you get into the sort of the depths of planning and all those sorts of issues. you would hope that the situation that we're sort of getting ourselves into at the moment, and certainly in the UK, but certainly probably across the rest of Europe, that hopefully going forward, some of that support will be even more easily available to such large projects. And when you look back at the last 3 years, which is really the time frame that sort of Northvolt has been really operational for, they're already sort of almost 18 months or 2 years through a major construction program, which is a major achievement, and that would not have happened without that that support from government and public bodies. So you would hope, I think, that in this situation at the moment, where the creation of jobs, the creation of the manufacturing sector is a very sort of political sort of topic, that support for such big projects would be more forthcoming. But we just need to wait and see if that materializes.
Absolutely. Thanks, Edward. Okay, well, let's make this the last question. And if perhaps everyone could be bold enough to give us their brief perspective on this, and I guess the ongoing role of the financial community within that. So yeah, who'd like to venture forth with the next to answer that one? Yeah, Bo?
I mean, for me, it's clear that the one thing that the COVID has brought about is something that is reinforcing the original strategy that was brought up by Northvolt, and that is supply chains. Because today we see an enormous push for building complete supply chains for batteries in Europe. And when you build this, and that is for de-risking actually. In my world, also giving that we have more ambitions of higher climate ambitions, I think that these two things together will make it likely that it will be deemed as less risky, I would say, to invest in battery supply chain in Europe, because the political price is very high if it doesn't happen, I would say.
Great, thanks. Okay, can we just hear briefly from all of the rest of you, if not directly in answer to the COVID question, then certainly in terms of your belief in the role of finance and
I think the direct impact of COVID, for me personally, if you live in a fairly congested area like I do, was quite remarkable, because clean air, it was very noticeable having fewer cars on the roads. So you'd like to think that coming out of the pandemic now, there ought to be a push for rolling out more electric vehicles quicker and faster to help cleaner air. I guess the danger here is, with the pandemic and the economies in recession, there's of course also a very much a strong driver to bring economies back out of the recession. And it seems at hand to use the industries that you have available to pull it back out of recession. And I don't think personally, in terms of battery powered vehicles and such like, that we are yet as advanced as we'd like to be. There are relatively few EVs on the roads. And the concern here is that the combustion engine may stay a little longer than we'd all like to see. But no, I remain positive. I'm quite enthusiastic about supporting green and sustainable projects. And I think we all have some form of responsibility to leave a legacy. If you have a family like I do, I want to tell my children that I'm trying to do something good to make your life and future worthwhile. And I think we all have to use an example like Northvolt as a very positive example that it can be done, and it can be done even in the middle of a crisis that we're going through at the moment. And there are many more organizations and companies out there that we're aware of that are also exploring battery manufacturing sites, and we'd love to support them. to the extent possible, we'll do it.
Excellent. Okay, that's a great summing up and a tough one to follow almost, I'd say, Marco. That's very eloquently put. Thanks. Okay, so Tim, Stephen and Joakim, we've run slightly over our time, so hopefully Lucy will let us just quickly do quick remarks from us. So let's run through. Tim, could you maybe just offer your final words on this today?
Sure. So I do think, or the response to the COVID crisis, at least in Europe, has been quite consistent in that it's very strongly focusing on a green recovery. I think that's as much a recognition of the importance of transitioning to a lower carbon economy, but also as Ed also alluded to, it goes hand in hand with economic recovery as well. So in that sense, the sometimes a bit of a false dilemma between sustainability and economy. And I think there's, well, definitely in Europe, a growing recognition of that. And in that sense, I don't think COVID will disrupt that, but actually maybe even accelerate it, as we've seen in the past weeks or past months. So that's, I think, encouraging for all the reasons that Marco mentioned as well.
Excellent. Okay, thanks very much, Tim. And we're about to get kicked off. So Stephen, if you could just maybe have a go at, we'll see how far we get.
Very quickly, I would say that for the future financings, it will require the same level of commitment from the banks, same level of passion, a bit of faith as well, and also to not to hesitate to put together teams with various expertise, various experiences, from mining to power, but also oil and gas, because to some extent it can look like a sort of midstream or refinery. So it has been financed almost on that basis. So this is the kind of thing that, people don't know. So we need to put whatever we know and whatever we learned in the past together and share experiences to find new ways of financing new projects.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. And finally, Joakim, from a quick, either your perspective or the B perspective.
Yeah. No, I'll keep it short. And question coming out of this pandemic, I don't know, from the B side, I mean, we're stepping up our lending through the pandemic, and obviously it's always been very much focused on energy transition and renewable energy. So from our side, obviously we hope that the commercial banks and other private players are with us to continue to finance projects like this.
Excellent. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much to all of you, and thanks so much to our viewers for watching. This will remain in the on-demand portion of the website, so there's still a lot more scope for a lot more people to see it as well. Lucy, thanks for being patient with us and allowing us that extra bit of time as well.
No worries at all, Andy, and thank you to all of the panelists for your insightful and interesting discussion. Yeah, we managed to obviously 1 hour and 15 minutes and had a lot to talk about. I'm sure you could go on for a lot longer, but I'd just like to again say thank you to Andy and the panelists, and thank you to all the listeners as well. What we've got coming up next, so that is the end of the sessions for today. But what we do have is our first speed networking, which is open to all attendees. So that will be running for 40 minutes. And the way that works is you'll be put into a room with 4 other attendees, and you'll be able to have conversations with cameras and mics on, obviously, and exchange contact details for 5 minutes, and then you'll be put into another group. So almost similar to what you would have at an event in a coffee break. So yeah, we'll go ahead and try that out. It's very simple to join if you just click on the button on your agenda. And yeah, you'll have until 12:15 to enjoy this function. And don't forget to keep your portal on for the rest of the day in case you receive any contact requests from the rest of the attendees. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you later on in the week.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye, everybody. Thanks a lot.